Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden rulebook that runs the world's biggest companies. We're talking about corporate governance, the system that really dictates who holds the power and who calls the shots. Okay, so let's just jump right in with a question that seems super simple, but really isn't. Who actually runs a company? You might think, oh, it's the CEO, right? Or maybe the board of directors, or the shareholders who own the stock. Well, as we're about to see, the real answer is a whole lot more complicated. This whole system has a name: corporate governance. The best way to think about it is like a country's constitution. It's the official set of rules that lays out how power is divided, who gets the final say on big decisions, and how everybody, from the top execs all the way down to a brand new shareholder, is held accountable for their actions. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get into the big competing theories that are the bedrock of governance. Then, we'll look at how huge crises have actually shaped the rules we follow today. We'll also tackle that central debate, profit versus purpose. And finally, we'll look ahead to what's next for how companies are run. All right, let's get into the big ideas first. There are basically three major schools of thought that have shaped our entire understanding of who a company is really supposed to answer to. And, each one gives a totally different answer to that fundamental question of who's actually in charge here. First up, you've got agency theory. This is the classic trust but verify model. It basically starts from the assumption that managers, if you just leave them to their own devices, are going to act in their own self-interest, not necessarily the company's. So the takeaway here is that shareholders need to put controls in place. Things like performance bonuses, stock options, and really strict oversight, just to make sure everyone's pulling in the same direction financially.
Now, completely flipping that on its head is stewardship theory. This view says, hang on a second, managers aren't just self-serving agents, they're responsible stewards. The idea is that they are naturally motivated to do what's best for the company out of a sense of duty. So in this world, the focus isn't on control, it's on empowerment. You create a powerful mission, and then you trust your people to get the job done.
And finally, there's stakeholder theory, which just throws the doors wide open. It says that a company's responsibility doesn't end with its shareholders, not at all. It actually extends to everyone affected by what the company does. We're talking employees, customers, suppliers, the local community, and even the planet itself. It's a huge expansion of accountability, and it's the philosophy behind things like sustainability reports and corporate social responsibility programs.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because this table just lays out the core tension perfectly. Are you building a system based on control, on trust, or on this much broader sense of ethical responsibility? The truth is, most companies today are a mashup of all three. They might use agency theory to design their sales team's commission plan, but then use stewardship theory to inspire their engineers with a powerful company mission, and then use stakeholder theory to write their annual environmental impact report. But here's the thing. These ideas didn't just stay in academic papers. They got tested in the real world, where the biggest changes in corporate governance have almost always been forged in the fire of some massive corporate crisis. I mean, just think about it. The major regulations we all live with today, they weren't created during peaceful, proactive moments. They were born out of absolute chaos. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act here in the US was a direct result of the unbelievable accounting scandals at Enron and WorldCom, where thousands of ordinary people lost their entire life savings practically overnight. A crisis like that exposes all the weaknesses in the system and forces change in a way that nothing else really can. Now, this crisis-driven approach has its upsides. It creates a sense of urgency and the political will to make tough reforms. But the huge downside is that it's always reactive. It's designed to fix the last problem, not to anticipate the next one. And this can lead to what people call a box-ticking mentality, where companies focus more on proving they filed the right paperwork than on actually being ethical. And that's a really subtle but incredibly important difference. This whole reactive cycle brings us right to the absolute heart of the governance debate, a question that companies are still wrestling with every single day. Are you here to make a profit, or are you here to serve a bigger purpose? On one side, you have this incredibly powerful argument for focus. The former CEO of Coca-Cola, Roberto Goizueta, put it perfectly. He said that a company's main job, its primary calling, is to create value for its owners, period. If you try to be all things to all people, you just lose your way. It's really an argument for ruthless clarity. But the modern counterargument is that you can't actually create long-term value for shareholders in a vacuum. Real sustainable success depends on a healthy ecosystem around you. You need happy employees, you need loyal customers, reliable suppliers, and a healthy planet. These aren't separate goals that you can pick and choose from. They're all completely connected.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that it's not an either-or choice. It's not profit versus purpose. The most successful and resilient companies today understand that the absolute best way to create value for shareholders is by creating value for their entire ecosystem. Purpose is what drives profit. Okay, so if that's the new reality, where is all of this headed? What does corporate governance look like in the future? What are the challenges waiting just around the corner?
I think the single most important thing to get is that governance isn't some dusty old rulebook that's set in stone. It's a living, breathing discipline. It has to evolve right alongside the businesses and the society it's supposed to guide. What worked 10 years ago or even last year isn't necessarily going to work tomorrow.
And this just shows you the new frontier perfectly. Boardrooms today aren't just talking about financial audits anymore. They're having deep debates about the ethics of AI. They're being held accountable for their environmental and social impact, what we call ESG. They are battling incredibly sophisticated cyber threats. They're even using behavioral science to spot the hidden biases in their own decision-making. I mean, the scope of what they're responsible for is just exploding.
At the end of the day, the goal of great governance is really shifting. It's moving away from just enforcing rules and overseeing things, and it's moving towards actively building organizations that are responsible, that are innovative, and that are a positive force in society, not just profitable machines.
And that leaves all of us, whether you're a leader, a board member, or just a shareholder, with one final vital question. In a world that's changing this fast, with this much technological power at our fingertips, the most important governance question is no longer just, can we do this? It's should we?